الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Inshallah, in this week's lesson we'll be looking at some rules and regulations with regards to qira'ah and recitation, and thereafter we'll be inshallah looking at some rules and regulations with regards to salah in congregation, salah with jama'ah, and also rules with regards to imamat, who can be an imam, who cannot be the imam, whose imamat is considered to be makruh, whose imamat is considered to be makruh tahrimi, severely disliked, and whose imamat is actually considered impermissible in Islam. So inshallah all these things will be looked at either in this week's lesson, but certainly in next week's lesson. Now we're going to start off with regards to qira'ah and recitation with salah. And before we look at the actual text, just firstly we're going to look at some contemporary issues with regards to recitation in salah. Now the first rule is that in all the prayers of nafal, so when we say nafal, we also mean the sunnah prayers. So all the rakat of nafal and all the rakat of sunnah prayers. So 4 rakat before Dhuhr, 4 rakat before Asr, any optional prayers, whether you are reading 4 rakat optional prayers together, or whether it is like 8 rakat in one go as is permitted in the Hanafi fiqh, say for example tahajjud prayers. So for every rakat of nafal or for every rakat of sunnah, it is obligatory that you recite Surah Fatiha followed by a surah. And it is also wajib and obligatory that the first 2 rakat of the first prayer, that there has to be Surah Fatiha and the surah. So for example, 2 rakat in Fajr, the first 2 rakat in Dhuhr, the first 2 rakat in Asr, the first 2 rakat in Maghrib, and also the first 2 rakat of Isha. Besides that, the remaining 2 rakat of Dhuhr, Asr and Isha, and the 3rd rakat of Maghrib, recitation is only sunnah. Not wajib or obligatory, but is only sunnah. So just say for example, in the 3rd and 4th rakat of Dhuhr, Asr and Isha, if no one was to recite anything, but he kept quiet or he just remained silent, then his salah will be valid. There's no need for him to do a sajda sahwa at the end, but his salah will be valid. Why? Because in the Hanafi fiqh we say that recitation is only obligatory in the first 2 rakat, and in the 3rd or the 4th rakat of the first prayer, recitation is only sunnah. So that is one ruling. The second ruling is that again in the Hanafi fiqh, it is wajib and obligatory that when it comes to recitation, that there is tartib and sequence in the recitation. So just say for example, if somebody prayed or was reciting Surah Fatiha and Alam Tara Kayfa Fa'ala Rabbuka bi Ashabil Fil in the first rakat, then in the second rakat it is considered makruh tanzihi for you to then recite, say, Surah Asr, or from وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ, or from Surah Humaza, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. Surah Al-Asr, Surah Al-Humaza are surahs which are before Surah Al-Fil. So for a person to reverse the sequence or the tartib of recitation or the way the Holy Quran was revealed, to go against this particular sequence when it comes to recitation, and that is considered makruh tanzihi and disliked. So remember, this rule only applies if it is a fard prayer. If it's an optional prayer, and if there is a change of sequence, then it is not considered makruh or disliked, but it is considered permissible. So just say if it was an optional prayer like nafal or sunnah, and if somebody in the first rakat recited say Qul a'udhu bi nas, and in the second rakat he recites Qul a'udhu bi falaq, then that will be considered permissible, mubah, like something which is permissible. And the reason for the flexibility in the optional and the nafil prayer is because, as all of you are aware that, and we're going to look at this later as well, inshallah, that optional prayers or nafil prayers, there's a lot of like wus'ah, there's a lot of like flexibility. There's flexibility in terms of you can actually pray nafil salah sitting down. If you are traveling, you can pray nafil salah on the seat facing whichever direction it is, whether it's like away from the qibla, it doesn't matter, your nafil salah will be done. So there's a lot of like flexibility when it comes to optional and nafil salah, and because of that reason, if someone was to change or alter the tartib and the sequence of recitation, then it would not be considered disliked and it would not be considered makruh. Another rule here, which the jurists have said to be makruh tanzihi and slightly disliked, is to miss out a small surah or a small chapter when reciting between two rakats. So if someone, say for example, in the first rakat recited Alam Tara, and then in the second rakat he misses out Ila fi Quraysh, and he starts reciting from Ara'ayta alladhi yukazzibu bid-din. So that again is considered makruh tanzihi, i.e. slightly disliked. And like with the previous ruling, this detestability applies only for the first prayer. However, when it comes to nafil or optional, then it is considered permissible and allowed. Another rule here with regards to this ruling, when we say small surahs or small chapters, we mean surahs from Lam Yakun Alladhina Kafaru, which is Surah Al-Bayyinah, which is basically the last quarter of the 30th chapter or the 30th para in the Holy Quran, all the way until the end. So if somebody, say for example, was reciting Lam Yakun Alladhina Kafaru min Ahli al-Kitab in the first rakat, and then in the second rakat he missed out Iza Zulzilatil Ardu Zilzalaha, and then he recited Surah Wal-Adiyati Dhabha, then that will be considered makruh tanzih. However, just say for example, if somebody was reciting, I don't know, Surah Yasin in the first rakat, and in the second rakat he misses out Surah Was-Saffati Saffa, and then he recites Surah As-Swat, which is like the second surah after Yasin, in the second rakat, then that would be allowed. Why? Because there is a gap of a big surah in between. So this detestability, what I just mentioned, like missing out or missing a surah, applies for small surahs of the Holy Quran. And the scholars have said that what we mean by small surahs or small chapters is basically from Surah Al-Bayyinah, the last quarter of the Holy Quran, from there all the way until the end. If somebody, when reciting over two rakats, was to miss out a surah from that particular portion, then it will be considered makruh tanzihi and slightly disliked. Another rule here with regards to recitation before we look at the text is with regards to converts, how will they recite or how would they pray their salah? Just say for example somebody just converted, say around half an hour ago just before salah time, then what would he pray when it comes to salah? Now, this is one benefit of reading salah behind the imam or in congregation, that as mentioned in the Hanafi books, that when a person is reading or praying behind the imam in salah, then the muqtadi or the follower, he doesn't have to do anything at all. Basically, he just follows the imam in action. Even if he doesn't recite the tasbih or the at-tahiyyat and so on, his salah is going to be done. Why? Because the imam's salah is done. So that will then pass on to the followers' prayers, and their salah will also be done as well. So if somebody converted and he hasn't recited any surah, or he doesn't know any surah, or he knows nothing about Arabic, then the encouragement to him should be that read the salah or the prayers behind the Imam so that your salah will be done without you or without the need of you reciting anything. However, that is not sometimes practical for everyone because there may be one or two prayers where he may not or cannot read behind the Imam. So in that situation, if he is praying salah individually or at home by himself, then the ruling is that instead of reciting, say, Surah Fatiha or a surah, he should recite some tasbih, something like Subhanallah. If he was to say Subhanallah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah 3 times, and then go into ruku, say Subhanallah and so on. And similarly, in the final sitting, when you do the At-Tahiyyat, so if he was to recite Subhanallah 3 times and then do Salam, then his Salah will be done. Obviously, you should encourage that person to start learning the surahs like Surah Fatiha and some other kind of small surah. But up to that point when he learns or memorizes those chapters which are required for Salah, if he was to recite some tasbih or some dhikr like Subhanallah or Allah, Allah, and if he was to pray his Salah in that particular way, then his Salah will be done. And this same rule here also applies to people or some ill people who cannot actually, they have this kind of speaking problem, or they have this kind of disability or some kind of learning problem where they cannot actually learn anything. Some people, they have this kind of problem where either they can't learn or they have this kind of disability which prevents them from speaking or which prevents them from speaking some words. Now, if in that situation, if that same individual, if he cannot recite or learn Surah Fatiha or any other surahs, then the advice or the ruling which should be given to him will be that recite Subhanallah or recite Allah, Allah or any tasbih which you know and pray and perform your salah in that particular way. So that will be the ruling for those who are converts, who haven't learned their recitation yet, or for those who have some disability and who cannot memorize, then for them, they should pray the salah by saying Allah, Allah or any other kind of tasbih and perform the salah in that particular way. Now, in the text, the first text which we're going to look at here in today's sabbath or lesson goes on to say that وَلَيْسَ فِي شَيْءٍ مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ قِرَاءَةٌ سُورَةٌ بِأَيْدِهَا لَا يَجُوزُ غَيْرُهَا. That in Islam or in any jurisprudence, there is no such thing that you have to pray a particular surah or chapter for a particular rakat, otherwise your salah or your namaz will not be done. There's nothing like that. I.e., there's no such ruling that, for the first rakat of Isha, I have to recite Wadduha. And in the second rakat, I have to recite Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak. There is no ruling such like that. There's no ruling that in the first rakat of Maghrib, I have to recite Alam Tara, and in the second rakat, I have to recite Ila Quraysh. There is no ruling. What the author is trying to say is that whatever you recite of the Holy Quran, your salah will be done, and there is no particular or specific surah or chapter you have to recite for your salah to be done and for your salah to be valid. Similarly, the author has said that it is also makruh tanzihi, you should say, that to determine a particular surah for a particular rakat in salah. Like some imams, they have a habit that they always recite certain surahs for certain prayers. And they always do that. Like, 7 days a week, they will always pray, say, first rakat, Wadduha, and second rakat, Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak. Now, to do that, then it is considered makruh and dislike. And the reason for its detestability is so that what happens is that people will then think or assume that this particular surah has more virtue and has more fadilat than other surahs in the Holy Quran for that particular salah. So you will then see the awam or the common people or the laymen just like thinking, or because the Imam is praying Wadduha in the first rakat and Alam Nashrah Laka in the second rakat, and he's always doing it, so that probably means that, praying or reciting Wadduha in the first rakat and Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak in the second rakat, this must be really, really virtuous, so they themselves will start doing it when they are praying Salah by themselves. So to stop the danger of people assuming or thinking that this particular surah has more virtues than the other for that particular salah, it is considered makruh to always and precisely read the same surah in the same salah, in the same rakat for that particular reason. And then the next part of the text just finishes off by looking at a ruling which we've already mentioned before with regards to the minimum recitation of the Holy Quran. If you remember, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah is of the view that when it comes to the fardiyat of recitation, then Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah says that you have to recite a minimum portion of the Holy Quran where people can say that you have recited a Holy Quranic verse. Ismu ma yutlaqu ismul Quran, as mentioned in the books of fiqh. And then the scholars have then categorized it and they've said that it is a minimum that you recite one verse of the Holy Quran. And we looked at it many weeks ago that when we say one verse of the Holy Quran, it means that you have to recite a verse which constitutes two words, such as Summa Nazar in Surah Muddathir. So a one-word verse like Mudham Matan in Surah Al-Rahman, then that would not be sufficient for the nature of your salah to be done. Now the next section which we're going to start is with regards to praying salah in jama'ah and in congregation. Now there are many virtues or many rewards with regards to reciting salah in congregation. The very famous hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that praying salah in jama'at in congregation is 27 times more rewardable than praying salah by yourself. Similarly, there is a hadith which can be found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that whoever prays salah with jama'at, with congregation, with takbir ula for 40 days, then this person will receive two glad tidings. The first glad tidings will be that freedom from Jahannam and the fire of hell, and the second glad tidings will be freedom from hypocrisy and nifaq. And there is also another hadith of Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim talking about the reward of salah and praying in Jamaat and congregation. And it says that whoever does wudu and then he goes to the masjid for salah, then for every step he takes, one reward will be written and one sin will be forgiven. So every step you take to the masjid, 40 steps, 50 steps, wallahu alam, then for every step, one reward will be written and one sin will be forgiven. And then when a person, when he comes to the masjid and he waits for the salah, then he will be rewarded for that. So again, that's indicating towards the virtue of coming early for salah. 5 minutes early, 10 minutes early, you come early and you sit and you wait for salah, you'll get the reward. And after a person finishes his salah, he remains there. So like all of the brothers here, after you pray the Asr salah, you have remained there. So as mentioned in the hadith, that the angels, they will shower their mercy and rahmah and blessing upon us until we leave the gathering and until we leave the masjid. So these are the sawab and the reward and the virtues for reading salah in Jamaat and in congregation. Now, there are two opinions in the Hanafi fiqh with regards to salah in Jamaat and in congregation. One opinion is that reading salah in Jamaat and in congregation is wajib, is obligatory. And that's why you see, like, especially from the other schools of thought, they are quite strict and they say that like it's like a wajib ayn, like it's like close to farz, praying salah in congregation. And that's why you see them that for Fajr prayer, you see a lot of Arabs coming for the Fajr prayer, and our subcontinent people are sleeping in their beds and so on for Fajr. So one opinion in the Hanafi fiqh is actually it's wajib to pray Salah in congregation. However, the Mustabi called, which means the opinion upon which the fatwa is on, that it is sunnah muakkada, emphasize sunnah, to pray Salah in congregation and in Jama'ah. Now, there are many reasons for praying Salah in Jama'ah and in congregation, many kind of other wisdom as well, because when people are praying Salah in Jama'ah, it shows unity. It shows like ittihad. It shows that there's a kind of togetherness of Muslims. And especially for those who are, like if you say, the ulamas of the community, those who are, like if you say, the elders and the respectable people of the community, it's even more important and imperative for them to come to the Jamaat and the congregation for Salah. And the main reason why is because it is a time when people can actually see you, and obviously if they have any questions or if they have any problems, then it is a good opportunity for them to ask you regarding some questions. That's why, like, whenever I'm at my local mosque, the most of the time after Salah, people will come and ask me this question, or I've done this in Salah, is my Salah done? Or I did my wudu this way, is my wudu done? So what will happen is that not only you're praying Salah, but afterwards when people are asking questions and you are answering the question, then they are also, it's also an opportunity for them to learn knowledge. And you will also get the benefit of as well, because when people are asking questions to you, then it also kind of refreshes your knowledge, whatever Allah has blessed you with. So you will also get the reward and the sawab. So there's many benefits, and also, as I said to brothers many times before, is that it's always important that you are connected with your local masjid. Any kind of activities which they are doing, try to participate and help them and assist them in any kind of activities, any kind of lectures or dars which is going on. It's very important that you actively participate in that. Because it's only when, as mentioned in many hadiths, it's only when people go against the Jama'ah. Okay? Obviously the Jama'ah which is mentioned in the hadith of Bukhari, Muslim and other books of hadith talks about Jama'ah in terms of the Muslims in general. But if we just take this particular hadith in its literal sense, when people go against their community or Jama'ah and start doing things individually, then that's where people are more prone and are more likely to go away from the straight path. It's very important always to keep a good connection and a good kind of ta'alluq with your local masjid and with the local people as well. Now the next part of the section which we're going to look at is with regard to who is the most worthy of leading the prayer. Who is the most worthy of leading the prayer. Now, in the Hanafi fiqh, it says that the most worthy of leading the prayer is a'lamuhum bis-sunnah. That person who is the most knowledgeable of the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, now before we actually look into that, I'll just mention a ruling here. What we're going to now discuss is applicable for situations where in a masjid there isn't a set imam, or the jama'ah or the congregation is not taking place at someone's house. If congregation or jama'ah is taking place in someone's house, let's say for example, like sometimes it happens in Ramadan where you go to people's house for iftar and then afterwards if the mosque is quite far away, people they tend to have Jamaat at home. So in that situation where Jamaat or congregation is taking place at home, the Sahibul Bayt, i.e. the person whose house it is, he is the most worthy of becoming the Imam, or he is the most worthy of being the Imam. Obviously the condition is that he has to be worthy of the Imam in terms of he knows how to recite Quran and is practicing and these kind of things. Obviously, if someone who's like, not practicing and doing drugs and so on, and for him to lead the prayer, that's not obviously feasible in that situation. But obviously if someone is like religious and he can recite the Holy Quran and he's practicing following the Sunnah, then he is the most worthy of leading the prayer. Even though there may be someone more knowledgeable than him behind, but he's the most, what I mean, he's the most worthy, he has the right to be the Imam. Now if we now say to that person, oh, Mufti Sahib, you become the Imam, or Maulana Sahib, you be the Imam, or Hafiz Sahib, you become the Imam, that's different. But we're just talking about in terms of the right, he has the right to be the Imam. And also, in a masjid where there is a set Imam. So in a masjid where there is a set Imam that for Fajr this Imam will pray, or for Zohar this Imam will pray, then he is the most worthy of leading the prayer, even though there may be someone more knowledgeable than the Imam behind him, even then the set Imam is most worthy of leading the prayer. Okay? Just because there's like a Sheikh behind or a Sheikhul Hadith behind, it doesn't matter. Whoever the set Imam is, he is the most worthy of leading the prayer. Again, if the set Imam then says to the Sheikhul Hadith or Sheikhul Hadith, you lead the prayer, that's different. But in terms of the right, he is the most worthy of leading the prayer unless he designates or gives that right to someone else. What we're now going to look at in the text in front of us is regarding situations where there's no set Imam there, or the Jamaat is not taking place at someone's house. So a good example could be, say, for example, at a university prayer room, or at work where obviously there's no set Imam there. So in that situation, a few brothers got together and they want to pray Salah. So who should be the Imam? Or just say, for example, like some group of people that come to the masjid after the Imam has already prayed the Salah. So in that situation, who is the most worthy of leading the prayer? Now the first rule which is being highlighted here is أَعْلَمُهُمْ بِالسُّنَّةِ. So the first test which we will use is that person who is the most worthy, is the most knowledgeable of the Sunnah. Now Sunnah in this context means Sunnah in terms of that person who is most aware of the rules and regulations of Salah and for prayer. So just say there's a person, but he's not aware of the rules and regulations of Salah. He may be aware of the rules and regulations, say, for something else, okay, for about on fasting, say, or about Hajj or something like that, but he's not that up to date, or he's not that knowledgeable when it comes to the rules of Salah, then he should not be made the Imam. But instead, that person is the most knowledgeable when it comes to the rules of Salah, he should be made the Imam. And the reasoning behind that is simple, because knowledge or ilm for Salah you require for every single aspect of Salah. Something like recitation, which we're going to look at later, that's only needed for one particular aspect of Salah, which is for the standing position. But ilm or knowledge is required for every aspect and every angle of Salah. A person has to know that if I do this, my Salah will break. Or if I do that, then my Salah would not break, but I will have to give such a sahwa here. Now these kind of rules they have to be aware of. Like in which situation my Salah will break, which situation my Salah would not break, and so on. So a person, number one, is he has to be knowledgeable and aware of the rulings of Salah. So just an example, there's 5 brothers that got together and they want to do Jamaat and congregation. So out of these 5 brothers, whoever happens to be aware of the ruling and regulation of Salah, he knows it properly, then he should be made the Imam. And generally speaking, what tends to happen is like Maulana Sahib says, for example, he tends to be the Imam. Why? Because he is aware of the rules and regulations of Salah. Number 2. Now just say if all the 5 brothers are equal in terms of knowledge, just alhamdulillah, they are all alims and scholars and they are all aware of the rules of Salah, when Salah breaks, when Salah doesn't break, then the next guideline which we will use to choose one of the 5 brothers to be the Imam is فَإِن تَسَاوَوْا فَأَقْرَأُهُ. that person who knows how to recite, the best reciter. Now here the word Aqra is in the meaning of that person who knows the Holy Quran with tajweed, who knows how to recite the Holy Quran with tajweed and with the correct makharij, i.e. with the correct pronunciation. Aqra here doesn't necessarily mean that person who got the most beautiful or eloquent voice. The main and fundamental thing here is that person who can recite the Holy Quran with tajweed and with the correct pronunciation and makharij. Now, reciting the Holy Quran with tajweed is something which is wajib and obligatory. Many people think that reciting Quran with tajweed is like the Wahhabi thing, something which wasn't around in Islam, and the Wahhabis, they kind of like innovated and so on. That is totally incorrect, because when we look through hadith literature and in particular the Quran, we find that during the Rasulullah time, Quran was recited with tajweed. In the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. And Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, his commentary or tafsir of this particular verse is tartil here means reciting the Holy Quran with tajweed. In a hadith of Tabrani, once Sayyidina Abdullah bin Masud radiallahu anhu, he heard a person reciting a verse from Surah Tawbah, and the way he recited was, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَةُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا. Basically, he recited it without any tajweed, i.e. without elongating, without doing the mud where he was supposed to do the mud. So Abdullah bin Masud al-Anhu, he grips that person and says, this is not how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so this is not the way the Holy Quran was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Abdullah bin Masud al-Anhu then explains to that person that you should have recited إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا all the way to the end. So what we can see from these two incidents is that tajweed is actually a science of the Holy Quran, and whenever we recite the Holy Quran, we should recite with tajweed. Where to do the exact, say, makharij, the correct pronunciation, that's something which is very important, because those of you who study Arabic language, we know that the Arabic language is such here that if you were to mispronounce or distort some words here and there, it totally changes the explanation, or it totally changes the meaning of the Holy Quran. And a simple and a good example I'll give is of the word qalb, which when you recite it with the big qaf means heart. But if you were to recite the same word, but if instead of reciting the qalb, you recited it kalb with a small kaf, then it gives the meaning of dog. So as you can see, contrasting difference. One gives the meaning of heart, and the other gives the meaning of dog. So if somebody was supposed to recite qalb, he recited kalb, he'll change the total meaning of the Holy Quran. And where you're supposed to recite kalb, you recite qalb, you're going to change the Holy Quran. So it's very important that when it comes to recitation, you be very careful and you recite it correctly, with the correct makharij and with the correct pronunciation. So I was saying that if all the brothers who are getting together to pray salat, so if they are all a'lam, if they are all knowledgeable, then the next guideline we look at is that person who is aqra, i.e. is the most, who knows how to recite the Holy Quran with tajweed and with the correct pronunciation. Then he goes on to say, وَإِن تَسَاوَوْا فَأَوْرَعُهُمْ. If alhamdulillah all the brothers are alims, they're scholars, they all know how to recite the Holy Quran with tajweed, just imagine all of them are hafiz of the Holy Quran, then in that situation, out of them, فَأَوْرَعُهُمْ, whoever happens to be the most pious, the most pious or the most religious, then he should be made the imam. And then he goes on to say, وَإِن تَسَاوَوْا فَأَسَنُّهُ. And if alhamdulillah all of them happen to be pious, then in that situation, whoever is the eldest, asannuhum means the eldest, the oldest out of the 5 brothers, then they should be made the imam. So the rulings which we looked at explains to us who should be the imam and so on. Now the next text then goes on to explain those types of people whose imamat is either makruh tahrimi, sabili dislike, and makruh tanzih. Now before we look at that, there are some types of people, their imamat is totally not allowed in Islam. Just say for example, someone like a Qadiani was to stand in prayer and was to lead the prayer and so on, then to pray salah behind him would not be permissible. There are some groups of Shia, depending on their beliefs and aqidah, it would not be permissible to pray behind him. For example, like a non-Muslim, if he was praying salah and you are praying behind him, then their imamat would not be allowed at all. Even women, just say for example, a woman was an imam, and there are men praying behind this woman, then the men's salah would not be done. Okay? So these are some types of people whose imamat is not allowed at all. What we're now going to look at here is those people whose imamat is makruh tahrimi, severely disliked, or makruh tanzihi. However, the prayer behind them would be done, but you will not get the full reward and the full sawab. Now the first example which we're going to look at here, the author says, وَيُكْرَهُ تَقْدِيمُ الْعَبْدِ وَالْأَعْرَابِ, that it is makruh, i.e. severely disliked, slightly disliked, to make a slave and a Bedouin an imam. So someone who's a slave, then you should not make him an imam, and someone who's a Bedouin meaning villagers, then you should not make him imam. Now, why shouldn't you make him imam? Generally speaking, especially in the olden eras, these people would tend to be like ignorant, and they were, generally speaking, would be unaware of the Islamic rulings regarding salah. Because a slave would be busy doing khidmah and looking after his master, so he didn't have time to learn about Islamic rulings and so on. So his imamat was considered slightly disliked. Similarly, those who were villagers, they tend to be like ignorant and so on. So their imamat was considered to be slightly disliked. However, if that is not the case in terms of if they are well versed when it comes to Islamic rulings and regulations regarding salah, then their imamat and them following would be, them being imam and leading the prayer would be allowed. Then the author goes on to say, wal fasiq, that someone who is a transgressor, then to make him an imam will be makruh tahrimi and severely disliked. Now, what is the definition of a fasiq? Probably a word which you may have heard or come across a lot, like this person is a fasiq. Now, what does Islamically the word or the terminology fasiq mean? Now, fasiq basically means someone who commits big sin, great sin, or habitually is committing small sin. So he's committing big sin, or habitually he's committing small sin. Now the reason why I mentioned the word habitually, it means that obviously we as human beings, we will commit sin. We're not like masoom, we're not like prophets, we don't commit sins at all. We do commit sins. But when we commit sin, we should then do tawbah and repent straight away. But this person here is always committing sin. Okay, always doing bad things, always like, I don't know, just for example, drinking alcohol, committing zina, looking at unlawful women, scholars class that as to be a minor sin, looking at unlawful women. But obviously, if you're always looking at unlawful women, then it will go and turn into a big sin and a kabira guna. So if a person is like that, always doing bad things, like listening to music, these kind of things which are not allowed in Islam, drinking alcohol, playing like say chess and these kind of games which are not allowed, these kind of things, if he was doing that always, okay, continuously is always doing it, then such a person, for him to be an imam, will be makruh tahrimi and severely disliked. And under the word fasiq, the scholars have said that an imam who doesn't have a beard, doesn't have a beard meaning like who trims his beard, shaves his beard, then he is also considered a fasik as well, and he should not be made to stand on this musalla and lead the prayer. I talked about the ruling with regards to beard, if you remember, in the Sahara section, and I mentioned that having a beard, fifth length of beard, is wajib. Okay, it's obligatory. So if an imam or someone is shaving his beard, and you could tell clearly that he's shaving it and it's less than a fistful, then such a person who is denying or who has little respect for something which is like a sign of Islam, then he should not be made the imam of a particular masjid, or he should not be made an imam for a jamaat and for a group to lead the prayer. Remember, whoever the imam is, normally nowadays we take the meaning of imam to mean just the person who's leading the prayer. However, the true meaning of an imam is a leader of the community, where people could look up to the imam, and by just looking up to the imam, the way he behaves, the way he follows the sunnah, people should just be like changing their life. People should be like flocking to the masjids and praying behind the imam because of such a great person he is. But if the imam is not following the sunnah himself, if the imam is doing bad things himself, then how can he then be a guiding principle or a shining light for the general people? So that's why it's very important that you have imams who are proper muttabi sunnah, following the sunnah all the time, and not doing things which are against the sharia. Inshallah, in next week's lesson, we will look at that if one was to pray salah behind the imam, a fasik imam, someone who shaves or trims his beard, whether the salah would be done or not, and whether one has to repeat the salah or not. Inshallah, we will look at that in next week's lesson. May Allah give the tawfiq to answer what we said. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. اللهم إنا نسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والغنيمة من كل بر والسلامة من كل إثم لا تدع ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا دينا إلا قضيته ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم صلى الله تعالى على خير محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. You should make one with one. There should be at least one.